Welcome to episode 1 of The Beautiful Mind in the Beautiful Game. My name is Chris Wehan, and I'm joined by a great friend of mine, mentor, coach, but I'll let him introduce himself. Gabe, welcome.
You're talking to me? Thank you. My name is Gabe Nosseir. Yeah, I feel the same. Love Chris Wehan in my life for sure. I'm a transformative life and performance coach. Work with parents of athletes, with athletes themselves, and with coaches, specifically in soccer in the beautiful game. So it's great to be here, Chris.
Likewise. And brief description of myself, I played professional soccer for 7 years. And now I'm also a coach, working mostly in person, but also more importantly on the mental performance side of sport, working specifically with athletes, hoping to grow and become better with their mindset, and hopefully reach their full potential on the field, but most importantly off the field as well. So, Gabe, today's episode we're talking about the parent-athlete relationship. You're a parent yourself, so you have great experience with that. I am also a young parent to a 2.5-year-old, so I haven't gotten quite to the sport side of things yet. But I have tons of experience, obviously, with sport and then how my parents raised me. But I wanted to start with this quote. This comes from Kylian Mbappe. So a lot of young parents now, when they have kids, there was this thing going around where Project Mbappe. I don't know if have you heard about that?
No.
Essentially, if you're having a young boy, you would start saying, "Oh, it's Project Mbappe," saying, "I'm gonna, get my kid who's, a week old." Or in some cases, people were saying this just when they found out they were going to have a boy. They're saying Project Mbappe, basically meaning they were hoping that their kid would become Mbappe. And Kylian Mbappe came out with a quote. He said, "Stop it, cut it all. It's Kylian Mbappe who tells you cut everything. My parents never put pressure on me. They let me have fun."
Mm.
Curious to know your thoughts around that quote.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And I was thinking that when you were reading it, I'm like, no, no, like, these things aren't planned very often. Now, I will say, like, I feel like Neymar was a project, but he did not have a very good relationship with his dad. His dad was actually super toxic in his life. So I don't, yeah, there's a Netflix special on Neymar. His dad was a professional footballer, and it was all about like developing him and even developing his brand, and you can see the strain on their relationship. So yes, he got to a higher level, but at the end of it, I'm pretty sure Neymar didn't have very good feelings for his dad. So what do is that worth it? Then that's always up to the individual. Maybe Neymar's dad, I'm pretty sure he passed away, but maybe he would say, yeah, it was totally worth it. But to like every human being out there just wants to feel deep love, especially from their earliest caretakers. That's what it's all
Yeah,
about, in my opinion.
yeah, I completely agree. And I think that would maybe be an episode in itself, studying some of these athletes. Tiger Woods comes to mind as well. I don't know if you've read the book about Tiger, the relationship between him and his dad. And I think his dad obviously had a big reason for Tiger having some of the issues that he had off the field. But
I'd say.
Tiger very much admired his dad, I know, and gave his dad a lot of credit for and kind of teaching him to be the golfer that he was, and the cutthroat athlete that he was. He credits his dad to a lot of that, but I would assume that some of the issues that Tiger faced were because of the things that he saw with his dad. So I'm sure that
Yeah,
could be an episode in itself.
totally. I'm sure it's pretty safe, in my opinion, to know that your suspicion is correct. Because you can, like the ego, you can use your ego to drive you to success in the third dimensional world of notoriety, of money, of success, and all those things. But to me, life is so much deeper and richer, and there's so many more important things, to life because, yeah, you can see based on, Tiger Woods' experiences outside of golf that those were very likely related to all that pressure and like living with that, kind of arrogance. Um, it can humble you, it can knock you off that pedestal you have yourself on. And then what are you left with after that, right? So in my opinion, yeah, as long as parents are there to support, just like Mbappe, it takes a lot, right? Mbappe obviously has a lot of physical, was blessed with a lot, a lot of physical genes, that to me, that is what really helps to propel superstars is you have to be born with the right genes,
Yeah.
and then you have to love the sport. Absolutely. And like parents very rarely can make their kids love something. They can, do it in ways to where they're just putting them in the right environment, but they can very easily help kids hate something, you know. Mm.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That hits home. I think you're relating it to my parents. My parents never played soccer. They didn't really know soccer or care for soccer, but they gave us myself and my siblings the opportunity to pursue whatever sport we loved. And I think to your point, they can't, no one can force you to love something, but someone can definitely, or no one can teach you to love something, but someone can definitely teach you to hate something if it's forced on you. So I'm curious to know as a parent that's got some years on me as a parent, how do you foster that love for something from your kids?
Well, for me, what I identified was I observed my kids. So I had a water polo player who started out, she was, started out in soccer just like a lot of young girls do. And that was, she was not my biological daughter, but I started raising her when she was 7 years old. And I could see soccer probably wasn't quite her thing. And luckily I didn't push her into it, but I could observe her and watch that, hey, she's aggressive and she has a good arm. And then she got into swimming. So I said, is there some sort of water polo like thing going on? And we were in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was like, how popular can water polo be? And so I did some research and found a great water polo club. And the coach, the director of the club, played on the women's national team for the U.S. in water polo. And I'm like, how did how did this happen? It was a world I had no idea existed in Albuquerque. And it's something that she, flourished with, and had a lot of early success and ended up training with the national team at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs for the first 2 years that she was playing. And I was like, okay, cool. So for that, it was just like observing and putting her in those situations, paying for, the club and travel, ODP, like all those things. That was my responsibility as a coach and just kind of kicking back. And I remember that when she was a teenager and she was very feisty teenager, and she would, when she would kind of get nasty with me, we'll just call it that. She would say, all you do is just sit there, and you don't say anything. And, she was just like, and I was like, to me, this is what I want to do because I had, 20 plus years coaching youth soccer, and I saw a lot of unhelpful situations from parents. So I wanted to be the one who was just quiet and bringing their kid there. And when she grew up and she got into her 20s, we had this similar conversation. And I don't think she remembered saying that because then she told me, she was like, I actually like that you just sat there and, you weren't like a crazy, water polo dad. So to me, that's how you foster is like you just put them in the right environment for them, or what you think is the right environment. And if it's not the right environment, you shift that and just let them have that experience. And this can go beyond soccer, water polo, or any kind of sports. And my son, he's a musician. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna foster this as much as possible, and anything with music, we're just gonna go to and let him develop that love, and for me to take a step back.
Yeah, that's that's great. I think being able to take that step back, and I think you showed something that I believe is really important for parents, is to say, is if hey, you if you love water polo, and if you're good at it, I'll do whatever I can to make that work. And I think nowadays we're in this interesting time with soccer specifically, but I imagine in all sports it's like this with the and this is even the space that I operate in the private lessons. And it there's often times where, is the kid coming here because for the parent and for the parent's ego, or is the kid here because they really, really want to be here? And when I was growing up, my parents didn't offer that. I don't think it was as relevant, the private lessons. I remember a few times them taking me places, but I ultimately wanted to go. And at the same time, I was always spending time in my sport just on my own, in the backyard, around the house, kicking a mini soccer ball around. It would drive my mom crazy. But I think my parents could obviously see my love and my interest in a soccer ball. So then it was easier for them to, foster that relationship with playing club or ODP or high school or whatever it was.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great that you had that kind of support. Did you ever feel pressure at all? Like, or did they ever say anything kind of unhelpful to you in the moment?
I never felt like there was them saying anything that was unhelpful. I think, uniquely enough, and this is something I haven't really spoke to too much, but I really noticed later in my career, I sort of felt this pressure to keep keep it going as long as I can, because I recognized how much family loved their interest in my career and my sport and playing games, and watching the games on the weekend or traveling to come and watch the games. And I remember having a conflict with that, saying like, am I starting recognizing that I was sort of hitting the burnout, but sort of feeling this pressure to try and keep it going because I knew others were very interested in it.
Hmm. Others meaning who?
Others meaning like family members, like, my parents, but, aunts and uncles and other people. It felt like they were very interested in talking to me about, the sport or watching the games. I knew that I had family members that absolutely loved watching games, because sort of that connection to, I find that with myself, I enjoy watching Messi because I have a connection to Messi. But when Messi's not on the field, I don't have as much interest in watching Inter Miami,
Right.
because I
Yeah.
have that connection with him, or watching my favorite golfers, or especially when they're in contention, but not really caring to watch a tournament when I don't have an interest in the people that are contending to win the tournament. So I felt that from those family members.
Yeah. Is that something, because I know you have several siblings, is that something you guys all talked about, with your siblings?
I've never talked to any of my siblings about that. My youngest brother had a short stint as a professional, and he played collegiately at Stanford. I would
Hmm.
have to talk to him about that if he felt a bit of that, because I know his collegiate career was really hard, and I think he felt sort of an obligation to try and pursue professionally. But I knew, and he definitely knew that he was done. He had a number of surgeries, and he had a really challenging coach in college, which is going to be our next episode,
Hmm.
um, of that relationship, and he burned out that way. And so I'd be curious to know if he pursued playing professionally because of that that interest of others.
Yeah. Sometimes you do feel that sense of obligation, right? And sometimes that's something that you're just making up and you're just feeling and you're kind of afraid to tell other people, right? Of afraid to let them down. But this it goes to actually what was triggering for me, or not triggering, what triggered my memory was this interview that I did with an Olympic gold medal skier. Her name's Ashley McIver. She was married actually to Jay Demerit, who played for the U.S. men's national team in Vancouver Whitecaps in Watford as well in the English Premier League at the time. But what she told me, the thing that was probably the most impactful thing that I remember and any of the athletes telling me in this podcast that I had called Clarity for Parents of Athletes, was she said kids are naturally going to feel pressure from their coaches, from their teammates, even from the fans, that the last place they need pressure from is from the home and from the parents. And that really spoke volumes to me because, they do feel that sense of pressure. And that if they have that safe space, if they feel comfortable to go to their parents and have open communication with them about anything, without fear of like being ridiculed or that they're letting somebody down, when they're able to express themselves, they are going to be so much more resilient in the world. It's like they need that safe space to come home to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. 100%, and they should. I think that parents should foster the openness between the two, because I've found in my experience that when I can be open and honest with someone, that I learn about myself in the process. And
Mm.
so I think the athletes being able to express something that's going on to their parent, and the parent is willing and open to receive that one, it can allow them to get it out there to maybe then receive a different understanding from their parent, because parents have a lot more experience and knowledge of things than a young athlete does, and so they can receive that information from parents. But I agree with you. The ability to express yourself and be open about something going on, it does make you more resilient and able to face things in life. I remember I was working recently with one of my athletes, and he's got some good potential as a soccer player, and so he's getting a lot of offers, a lot of interest from teams. And he was playing on one particular club team and had the opportunity to train with a higher level club team. And I remember the dad approaching me one day and saying, "We need to speak. You know, my son doesn't want to train with the MLS Next team." And the dad was having a hard time with that information because that's the higher level team. MLS Next is the highest level of youth soccer at the moment. And I could sense the tension in the dad, that his son didn't want to train with that team. And when I asked the son away from the dad, it was easy for him to be very open and honest with me, which I was very prideful on, because that's the space that I want to create for my athletes, the ability to be open and honest. But he just simply said that I just don't enjoy the environment. I don't enjoy the players. I don't enjoy the way they speak to each other. I don't enjoy the culture. It doesn't feel good to go. I don't enjoy showing up to practice. I'm not looking forward to it. With my other team, I love going to practice. I love my coach. I love the culture. I have fun. I can express myself. I'm more confident. And so there's that fine line, but I could sense that it was a little bit challenging for the athlete to bring that to the parent. And that's kind of where I envision my coaching, is almost a place to kind of mend the two. I don't know if you've felt that as well in your coaching, of working with maybe parents more in particular, that you kind of are able to have install a different understanding for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about self-awareness. And when parents can look at themselves in an honest way, then that's how they grow. Just like anything in life, just like players, parents aren't any different. And I think life provides us with so many opportunities to take a look at ourselves, because you're composed of your essence, your higher self, and then also your false self, your shadow side. And that's the side a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, because we all want to be like, no, I'm perfect, I'm good the way I am, and I do everything, from love and light, and that's just not accurate, and it's okay because we're human beings and we're not here to have like that kind of like false experience. We're here to experience all of it. And so, one thing that I encourage everyone that I work with is that there are going to be so many opportunities come face to face with your shadow side and your false self, and your child being in youth sports is one of those perfect examples, or of you playing sports as well. Your shadow side comes up as well. So that it's a great opportunity, and that's okay because it's like, okay, we want things to come up so we can take a look at them so that we can grow from them and to become, better versions of ourselves. To me, that's what life is about. And so we can always, reflect on how we're communicating with people, how our children are feeling towards us is a huge indicator of what we need to work on because they're like little mirrors. And,
Mhm.
I've seen that so many times. I mean, when I was coaching, I coached a very high level youth club team, nationally ranked, like very successful. And so, along with that, like some of our superstars and their parents, the parents especially, like didn't always operate from their essence. And had one experience in particular where this dad came up to me after the first game of a big tournament. We had 4 games, and I knew they were all going to be tough games. So I was resting some of my players, and he didn't like that I rested his son. And there was another guy scoring goals for fun. And for some reason, this dad, I think, had this internal rivalry between his son and this other young man, and he came and like started yelling at me when I was walking off the field after it was like a 7-0 win or something like that. It was like a big win, and with the future tough games ahead of us. And so that being said, it's like to me, it's like somebody who could be more self-aware could say like, okay, I'm not going to approach my son's coach right now. What is this really about? That takes a lot of maturity, and that's where like working with a coach, someone like you, someone like me can help parents out, can help athletes out. It's because we can say, okay, yeah, what was coming up for you? What was the situation? It's like, okay, well, you were a little jealous. Where does that come from? That comes from fear of your son not being successful, of you not being like seen as a successful father or good enough, and your son not getting these college scholarships or the notoriety and all these things. That's how you work with certain things, is like you see them come up and then you can address them, but it's hard for people to do on their own. That's why it helps to hire people like us.
Yeah, and I always say this to people that approach me for coaching is that I admire your courage to seek guidance. I think that's the first step in all of it, and then the openness to take in different knowledge and understanding. It's so hard to become really aware of ourselves without putting in work in anything in life. But I think the more you put in that work, the more you can start to understand why your feelings come up, why things arise. Maybe there's a fear that you're putting all this money into sport and it's not going to amount to anything,
Hmm.
that it's essentially going to go to waste, or that it wasn't worth anything because your kid didn't get the scholarship. And my dad actually presented this to me the other day. He said that, and I had no idea. He said, parents, when after I went to college and then my younger brother was, sort of coming up the youth ranks, and he was a very good youth soccer player and was getting a lot of interest from colleges, and I was already playing in college, and parents would ask him like, "Oh, like what are you guys doing?" Like, and it now makes sense that they were coming from a place of fear of their own ego not being satisfied. So, they were asking my parents, what are you doing to get them into college? And my dad was kind of like, not doing anything,
Yeah.
they love it and they're willing to sort of sacrifice a lot. And, we're assisting them, but we're not doing anything crazy. Like, I don't know what you're asking, but I think that question was coming from a place of fear. And I think also in comparing, I think that happens a lot in youth sports. And, it's a balance, because sometimes I think in my work, I don't do it for me, and I know you don't do it for you, but when I work with athletes, I feel confident that I'm going to install confidence and belief in themselves. And when I know that a part of the business is word of mouth, and when parents see another kid, developing and growing at a faster rate, they're like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Mhm. Yeah, it's pretty normal to do, right? I think these people were looking for the magic formula that your parents had. And, you'll say they weren't doing anything, but they were doing something. They were letting you go on your own journey, right? And just supporting them.
Mm.
And that's what I found out, like talking to all these athletes when I was recording my podcast, because I wanted to help parents to like figure it out better, to support their parents based on the experiences I had while coaching youth soccer. But they all said the same thing, you know, the journey is theirs, and just to love them and support them and be there for them and put them in the right places. There was only one of the athletes that I interviewed who had a pushy dad, at least that admitted they had a pushy dad. And that was Doug Flutie, who played in the NFL, played in the Canadian Football League, won the Heisman Trophy. He said his dad was tough on him. But his saving grace was that he played sandlot football every day after school with his two brothers. So that developed a love for the game. It just came naturally to them. So parents almost need to do less than to do more, when supporting their children. They just need to, be able to write those, well, I guess people don't write checks anymore, but whatever, enter their credit card information when paying dues, and that's a huge part of it. And I do think that is a big, like you alluded to earlier, that's a big stressor on some parents of like, we're paying all this money, is it worth it at the end? And then guess who's going to feel that energy, even if the parents don't express it, even if they're not like, I'm paying all this money, you need to go out there and work hard. Some parents do that, but even those who just carry that energy, children are very sensitive to their parents' energy, and they're going to feel that and feel that pressure. So it's like, if you can just, what I advise parents is like, yeah, you have to pay that money, and that's just unfortunate part of the pay for play model that exists in the US, but it's the reality. But if you can look at it as like, you're not paying to try and help them get a college scholarship, you're paying to give them life experiences.
Hmm.
And you don't know what those experiences are going to be, but to me, like, they're going to get so many bigger experiences out of life than a college scholarship. Those relationships, and like how to handle stress, and how to handle referees and coaches and other players and parents. Like, there's so many valuable experiences in life, especially like deep friendships. And I'm still friends with people that I played club soccer with, when I was a teenager, that we're still super tight, and that wouldn't have happened without soccer. So to me, it's like, can parents look at the big picture?
I had a coach that used to share apologies about the background noise. I had a coach that shared something, and he would speak about this a lot to parents, and it really stuck with me. And he used to say that when you invest in yourself, it's never a bad investment. And I still stick with that statement to this day. And I believe that sports is exactly one of those things that you're investing in. Oftentimes, it's the parent investing in the child, but at the bottom line, it's the experience and the lessons and the friendships that you gain from being a part of team. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I do what I do. And at least from a personal note, is I'm always investing in ways to where I can grow and know myself on a deeper level. And whatever my kids are into, I'm gonna invest in them and then just kind of watch them have their own experiences and try not to get tied up in it as much as possible, you know. Because that's how we grow, and we grow through our most difficult times in life, you know, and that's a lesson I had to remind myself as my son was experiencing something, and I could he and I were having kind of a little bit of conflict in our relationship, and I had to take a look at myself and say, like, I'm trying to protect him from having kind of difficult experiences in life, you know, and I know that's what made me the strongest. So, you know, I encourage parents to like invest in your children to have experiences, but also don't just expect them and to celebrate all the great experiences, because the more challenging experiences are actually going to really, really help them on a deeper level. You know, it's really hard as a parent to watch your child go through something that's really difficult, but also if they have that support from you at home, they're going to be able to bounce back from it, and to learn and grow from it, you know, and it's not an easy thing to do as a parent, you know.
Yeah, that what came up for me when you were talking about that was my relationship with my parents, and they did a phenomenal job when I remember going through difficulties, especially in my career and in life in general, but more specifically in my soccer career at certain points. They were always a listening ear. They did an incredible job of allowing me the space to speak about things, but and I never asked them this, but I'd be curious to know. I never felt like they intervened in my struggles and in my problems. And I think that's a problem in this day and age, that parents want, like you said, they don't want to see their kids struggle or have a hard time. They want, and I've found that in myself with my kid, is that you don't want to see them hurting or struggling, but struggle is such a big part of life. And I think that's a beautiful lesson that we learn in sport, that it's not always going to go our way. We're not always going to win the championship, and we're going to lose, and we're going to have to face that. And parents that kind of let their kid go through their journey and struggle and have adversity, rather than step in and try and make it so that their kid never has difficulty, sort of hinders them from the real world.
Yep, absolutely. You're going to stunt their growth, essentially. You know, if parents, this is a big, you know, a thing I tell parents whenever I'm working with them, whether it's in group setting or individually, I say, like, the strongest in your life, it wasn't all the great times, it was the struggles, you know, that made you the person that you are today. So why would you want to take that away from your child, you know? Now, of course, there's a responsibility in it as well. You don't just let them have these, like, you know, put them in dangerous situations or with super toxic coaches or whatever. You know, you still have to, you know, make sure they're in an environment to where they can still grow, but that they're going to have those difficulties along the way. And to me, this goes way back to having that, you know, that healthy and safe and nurturing home environment for kids to go back to. You know, and that way they can go out and face the quote unquote real world in a much more comfortable and confident way.
Yeah, so I completely agree. And I think the thing that we keep talking about that we haven't necessarily addressed is that the team we have at home, the relationships that we have at home, the environment that is cultivated at the home is the most important one. And that's sets the tone for the athlete being able to, I think, in the long run. And some athletes, I think, come out of really difficult situations at a very young age, saying, this is, things were modeled for me so poorly that if I just do the opposite, then I should be able to succeed. And they succeed in that environment. But I think chances are that the environment that's cultivated at home, that's a healthy, positive one, allows the child to succeed as an athlete and then ultimately in life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to help them have like um, more emotional intelligence. And that's something that's huge in sports, especially as you get up to those highest levels. When you're faced with that kind of pressure, are you going to be able to maintain your cool and maintain your presence and focus? Because I'm sure you've seen it as a player. I've definitely seen it as a coach where people kind of lose their stuff, when they're faced under their pressure like situations. And so that all comes from the home and from modeling of the parent and how they deal with stress and how they deal with conflict as well. Like kids are always observant, so observant, even when you don't say anything as a parent, they can still feel your energy. And I encourage like parents to identify their long-term goals for their sons and for their daughters is not about I want them to have a college scholarship. I want them to get a good job when they're adults. It's to identify those deeper and richer end games of like, do you want to have a great relationship with your child? Do you want them to be a resilient person in life and be able to like handle adversity in like a strong and confident way? Do you want them to be confident, to be able to look at people in the eyes? Well, if you keep all those in mind as a parent, you can always ask yourself, is what I'm doing, is what I'm saying going to put them in line to achieve those goals? And if not, then to make sure and shift. And the more work parents can do on themselves and increase that self-awareness, then the more likely those deeper and richer end goals, it's likely for them to happen, actually.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I think a great end sort of to this conversation that could go on for ages and ages. But Gabe, thank you for your wisdom. Do you want to tell the audience how they can get in touch with you?
Yep. You can go to my website, aclearmind.com, and we'll put them in the show notes. But I have a list of all my programs. Again, I work with parents of athletes, work with the athletes themselves and coaches. I can work on any sport, but of course, soccer is the one that's dearest to my heart. So I have a lot of free resources on there as well as links to my social media. So what about for you, Chris?
Likewise, for me, you can go to my website, www.cocreatesc.com, as well as my Instagram and YouTube that will be linked in the show notes for all the information that I give out free. And then I work specifically with athletes in person, but also online on the mental performance side of sport. And likewise, I work with soccer players because of my background, but I'm open to all athletes as well that are looking to just grow in their mindset as it pertains to performing well on the field and off the field as well. So, Gabe, any last comments?
No, just remember it's their journey, parents, and just to make sure and always check yourself and operate from your heart. And Chris, I look forward to these next few episodes, the one on the coach player relationship and all the future ones that we have as well. Looking forward to it. It's always fun to work with you.
Likewise, Gabe. Yes. And I just want to say to athletes, remember that it always starts with the self, and you can, with coaches and guidance and seeking higher wisdom, that you can co-create the best possible outcome for yourself. So, Gabe, I enjoyed it and looking forward to these episodes coming out soon.
Likewise.